Welcome to 89 News Exclusive. The highlights of this episode are the cause of Li Keqiang's death and the PLA Rocket Army case. How a Sydney-based Little Pink media director screwed up the rocket propellant business of his family in China, triggering the shocking case of China PLA Rocket.
Welcome to our channel. We are dedicated to providing you with exclusive current affairs and entertainment news. Before the show starts, please click the little bell below the screen to subscribe to our channel. Today, we are interviewing Mr. Chang Feng.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Hello to all the channel viewers.
Okay, Mr. Chang Feng, could you first give a brief introduction of your background? How did you come to know about these exclusive news tips?
In the early 1990s, after graduating from university, I joined a state-owned Chinese arms export company. At that time, China's arms exports were mainly handled by a few companies, including Polytech, Norinco, and New Era. Then there were Lingnan and Jing'an, which rose by taking over Xinjiang's business. There were also two Hong Kong arms brokers, Nanguang and Zhongfu, for China arms export. They were just playing minor roles. The two biggest players were Polytechnology and Norinco. Norinco doesn't need much explanation. It was a direct subsidiary under the Chinese Ministry of Weaponry at that time. Polytechnology was under CITIC and mainly controlled by the General Staff Department's Military Assistance and Trade Bureau. He Ping, the husband of Deng Xiaoping's daughter, He Pengfei, the son of Marshal He Long, and Wang Jun, the son of General Wang Jun from CITIC, controlled the company. New Era was a window company under the China National Defense Science and Technology Commission. But the National Defense Science and Technology Commission also controlled all of China's military export licenses at the time. Lingnan and Jing'an were companies under two different China government ministries. Why did Lingnan and Jing'an take over Xinjiang's business? It's because of an incident that happened with the General Logistics Department of the PLA. Xinjiang had a branch manager named John Legua, who was the son-in-law of Wang Ping, one of the founding marshals. His subordinates, for some reason, used fishing boats to smuggle some Type 54 Black Star pistols to Taiwan. At the time, cross-strait relations were improving, and this incident caused a huge negative impact. The China central government was furious and stripped Xinjiang of many of its arms export privileges. But many of Xinjiang's customers moved to these two smaller companies, Lingnan and Jing'an. That's the brief structure of China arms export business. Why do we say Zhongfu and Nanguang were just playing minor roles? Zhongfu was a window company set up by the Ministry of State Security in Hong Kong. They could not apply for arms export license from mainland China, so whenever they took an order, they had to cooperate with one of the 5 licensed companies. As for Nanguang, it was established by the Ministry of Foreign Trade in the 1960s to support the Communist Party of Malaysia and other Southeast Asian communist movements. This company used to smuggle arms using fishing boats back in the day. After China's relations with the West improved, this company's business gradually declined. By the mid-1990s, it was reduced to just an old man guarding the office. After I joined this company, due to some coincidences and opportunities, my business grew considerably. However, something happened along the way. It involved Poly Company, specifically He Pengfei and He Ping, who had a conflict of interest with China's New Era company over an export deal of TNT explosives. Initially, it wasn't a big deal. Chinese arms companies competing with each other was pretty common. But the most frustrating part was that myself, an innocent person, ended up becoming a scapegoat. How did I become the scapegoat? It was mainly thanks to Premier Li Keqiang, who was chairman of the CYTS, China Youth Travel Service Industrial Company at the time, and Luo Zhijun as GM. In order to curry favor with the Deng Xiaoping family, especially He Ping and Deng's daughter Deng Rong, they insisted on using me as a scapegoat. They used me as a stepping stone for their own rise. And it wasn't just once or twice, they kept framing me for 2 or 3 years, trying every possible way to do so. Because they couldn't mess with the other princelings, children of high-ranking officials, they assumed I was just a small business person without any strong background. They thought using me as a scapegoat wouldn't provoke retaliation from any of the other powerful families. This way, they could both advance their careers and flatter the Deng family. I was pushed so hard by them that, in the end, I had no choice but to turn their own tactics against them. Nowadays, many people are spreading videos online, quoting Li Keqiang as saying, "What people do, the heavens are watching." He also talked about how the Yangtze and Yellow rivers won't flow backward and how 600 million people live in poverty under low income level. Why didn't he say this before? Those spreading these videos are either being manipulated by someone or are simply foolish. Think about it, a wolf won't emerge from a flock of sheep. Similarly, a sheep won't emerge from a pack of wolves. If a sheep or a little rabbit did appear in a pack of wolves, they would have been eaten long ago. It wouldn't have taken 30 years for him to get eaten, right? My personal experience proves this. Li Keqiang and Luo Zhijun suppressed private enterprises and foreign companies, and they even used national security forces to suppress foreign enterprises. Their methods were even more ruthless than what you see now. Do you think when he came to power, he would embrace universal values? Let me tell you about my personal experience. You can see for yourselves. Take a look at how he really operated. And whether he supported, instigated, or covered up any crimes against humanity, you can judge yourselves. In the end, you can make up your own mind, right? I suspect many people won't believe me, that's fine. Today, I'll just give a brief. I welcome anyone to challenge me. You can leave your questions or comments under this channel, 89 exclusive news. Bring up your questions and challenge me. The sharper the questions, the better. In the future, I will present all the evidence and proof to you. You'll see whether what I'm saying is true or not, right? To be specific, back then, our company received an order from a foreign company. It was a military order from a foreign government requesting to import TNT explosives. Our company's local agent was eager to do business and forged my signature. They then placed a bid at an extremely low price, defeating all other competitors. When I saw this, I thought, this won't work. I said, this agent is being dishonest, this is unacceptable. We couldn't accept such a low price. So, I immediately reported this issue to our company's executives, saying, this isn't right, they are breaking the rules. As a result, certain executives in my company, driven by internal politics and their own personal interests, insisted that I go along with it. One of the leaders and I were on a business trip abroad at the time. He insisted that I sign off to fraudulently claim tens of thousands of yuan from the company. I said, I can't do this. I couldn't take the blame for this. I had just graduated from university. If something went wrong, I'd get a 2 to 3 prison sentence at the very least. He took the money, so why should I take the responsibility? He even didn't plan to share it with me. So, I refused to go along with it. Later on, as the issue with the TNT explosives unfolded, they sought cooperation with the New Era company at the time. Originally, Poly Company was incredibly domineering back then. They completely dominated companies like Norinco, North Industries, New Era, and even Lingnan and Jing'an. As for Xinjiang Company, there's no need to even mention them. Poly crushed all these companies. No one dared to compete with them. Whenever anyone tried to make even the slightest move, Poly would hit them with a big stick, you know. They would constantly stir up trouble by appealing to the National Defense Science, Technology and Industry Commission. It was always the top princelings, children of elite officials, involved, no one dared to challenge them. I thought to myself, the leaders in my company must have lost their minds, they had the audacity to challenge them. How could they dare to do such a thing? Moreover, I had this issue with one of my executives who wanted to embezzle funds. That's why we didn't get along, so I decided to resign. When I resigned, I made sure to sever all ties with the company by paying them a large sum of money as training fee. Why? As the deputy said, you're so young and you've already handled such big business for us. You know. We are talking about several $1 million. The company had invested in training you, and now you're just leaving. Shouldn't you pay a training fee for that? I said, fine, I'll pay it. So, I handed over what was considered an astronomical amount for a training fee at that time. Why did I pay this money? Because I suspected that when I left, the company would probably make me the scapegoat, pushing all the blame onto me. So, in order to ensure that this wouldn't happen, or escalate into some legal disputes, I paid the money, basically to buy myself some peace of mind. But later on, Poly Company, Heping and Hepingfei had a violent clash with New Era Company for the TNT business. During the time when I tried to resign, something happened. I had 2 uni classmates. One worked at CYTS Development Company and the other worked at the Beijing MSS. One day, they brought along another person from CYTS, a guy named Deng, who also graduated from our uni but from a different department, to see me. They insisted on telling me that their company had developed a civilian alarm device for explosives detection and wanted me to help promote it. I told them that our company didn't really have any clients in that field, so how could I help? They said they just needed to meet their task quota and asked me to keep the device in my office for now, and if there were any clients, I could promote it. If not, they would retrieve it after a while. I had no choice, so I accepted it without much thought and put it in my cabinet. Not long after that, about 3 weeks later, after I had resigned, someone from our office contacted me, saying that my cabinet hadn't been opened in a long time and that people from CYTS were there to retrieve the sample. They asked me to come over. I went, and after a lot of effort, I finally managed to open the cabinet. What happened next was surprising. My colleagues noticed that the alarm device's light was still on. Since our company dealt with arms equipment secrets, they became highly suspicious and asked what was going on. The guy from CYTS, Deng, started panicking and hurriedly claimed that they had forgotten to turn off the power light. At that moment, I felt like something was off, but since I had already resigned, I didn't bother to think too much about it and just left the office. It wasn't until later that I learned about the entire TNT business conflict. This caused a significant conflict between Poly Technologies and the New Era Corporation at the time. Here's why. Our company had worked with New Era Corporation to get an export license for this matter. The price was set unusually low, making the situation highly sensitive, and there was a fear that the license wouldn't be approved. However, New Era Corporation, driven by some irrational motives, approved it. Once it was approved, He Pengfei and He Ping were furious. They went straight to the chairman of New Era Corporation at the time, Li Keqiang. Now, Li Keqiang is a man and supposedly a descendant of a so-called martyr within the Chinese Communist Party, serving as the chairman and general manager of New Era Corporation at that time. It's said that one of the two heads was particularly domineering and slapped the approved export license documents on Li Keqiang's face, yelling at him for a full half hour, asking, "Why did you approve it? What right do you have to approve it? The price is so low, how could you approve it? Do you realize that you've messed up the entire national defense export market? Don't you know this is a betrayal of national interests?" However, there were factions within the National Defense Science, Technology and Industry Commission, especially within the General Logistics Department, who were unhappy with the dominance of the Deng's family and saw them as overbearing bullies. Many of these factions also had princeling backgrounds, descendants of high-ranking communist officials. Li Keqiang was subjected to heavy bullying. Yet, despite this, both our company and New Era Corporation cowered. They didn't dare admit their mistakes and somehow pinned the entire matter on me, a tiny employee who had already resigned. They claimed that I had authorized the client's signature and that the price was too low. If they didn't follow through, both our company and New Era Corporation would have to pay a massive compensation fee. So, to save the country from financial losses and avoid further damage, they had no choice but to follow through, and they blamed the trouble on me. Later on, I figured out that the CYTS and Beijing MSS coming to our company with an alarm device might have been trying to install a listening device. From then on, I became very wary of them. After leaving the company, I partnered with 2 of my high school classmates to start a small business. We worked with other import and export companies, selling civilian products like clothing and shoes to Eastern Europe. At the time, I had a British client who wanted to set up an office in Beijing for aviation testing equipment business, so we discussed this with the 3 of us. Both ventures were going well, but due to a business trip of mine outside Beijing, my 2 partners, whose foreign language skills weren't great, they brought in a uni classmate of one of my high school friends to act as a translator. This person was a graduate of Beijing University of Economics. This guy, Wang, was invited to help with communication as an interpreter with our British clients while I was out of town. After that, Wang would occasionally drop by our office under the pretext of volunteering to help. At the time, my 2 partners, wanting to appear generous, gave him 3,000 yuan for his assistance, and Wang, having gotten a taste of it, kept coming back, hoping for more part-time jobs. Eventually, Wang pulled me aside one day and said he knew what kind of business I had been involved in before. He revealed that he worked for the Beijing MSS and wanted me to collaborate with them on a project to prevent the spread of weapons of mass destruction aimed at a specific country, which I won't name due to its sensitivity. I refused outright. Why? First, after leaving the arms export company and being scapegoated, I knew better than to get involved. Second, I had heard of a similar situation involving Norinco North Industries Group when they were caught exporting sensitive defense technology to the Middle East. The international community condemned them, and Norinco blamed it all on one employee, saying it was a personal action, unrelated to the company. The employee was sentenced to several years in prison. With that precedent in mind, I was cautious. I thought to myself, you're all up to no good. What if your so-called non-proliferation project suddenly turns into proliferation, and I end up being the scapegoat again? I firmly refused to participate. After that, Wang began exerting negative influence on our business partners and my high school classmates, sabotaging our clothing and shoe export business and even trying to ruin our plans for the British company Beijing office. At first, I didn't think much of it. I wondered what harm a tiny MSS staff could do, especially since my classmates and I all had some high-level connections. But Wang wouldn't stop. One day, I bumped into him at a subway station. I don't know if it was by coincidence or if he arranged it. He arrogantly told me, "You can only cooperate with us. If you don't, you'll never succeed in anything. You'll be a failure." He insisted that I become a friend class informant for them. I thought to myself, you're not going to get anything from me, so I didn't take it seriously. But as things escalated, I realized they weren't going to let this go. I'm just a tiny role, and they seemed so powerful. So, I thought, fine, I'll play along with you to achieve a surprise. Later, I found out from others that Wang had been a youth league cadre at University of Beijing Economics and was a protege of Cheng Hong, Li Keqiang's wife. Many of the people causing trouble in our company were my old classmates from high school and uni. Some were relatives of high-ranking youth league officials, while others were subordinates of Li Keqiang and Luo Zhijun. At the time, I didn't understand why they were so insistent on getting me involved. It wasn't until later that I gradually figured it out. Finally, I participated in their so-called non-proliferation action. The father of our owner in a Little Pink Media in Sydney also participated in this operation. You know, that's why I say his good son ruined their family's rocket propellant business and ended up making such a big news. I'll get to that in a bit. After participating in this so-called non-proliferation action, I started to feel like they were going to use me as a scapegoat. There were all kinds of signs pointing in that direction. So I started thinking of ways to leave mainland China. It just so happened at that time that Ma Jian, the former deputy of MSS, now ousted, contacted me using a cover identity through one of my mate in high school. I didn't know his real identity at the time. He was trying to get promoted to minister assistant of MSS, but his enterprise division was in deep debt. He was at a loss about how to deal with it. Through one of my high school mate working in Beijing MSS, he came to me for help. I gave him an idea to solve the problem, and after that, he realized I could be useful. He started trying to use me with other plans to make money for them, which I used as an opportunity to escape overseas, to the free world in the West. After I escaped, because of my shared special experiences with the father of the Sydney Little Pink Media owner, I became a target of various political forces in mainland China. They wanted to use my unique experiences as a bargaining chip in their domestic political struggles and to extract certain benefits in Sino-American relations. As a result, I personally experienced, witnessed, and even got dragged into a series of major events that affected Chinese politics and Sino-American relations. I came to know secrets that nobody else knew, secrets that still haven't been revealed. These include why Wang Lijun fled to the U.S. Chengdu consulate in China, something that mainland China has never disclosed, right? Many things from the Jinan trial weren't fully revealed either, right? There's also the infamous case of Zhu Naiyin, who killed his wife in 2007, a crime that shocked both New Zealand and Australia. But what secrets led to her death? What was she involved in? That mystery has never been fully solved. Then there's the connection between the Rocket Force case and the death of Li Keqiang, details of which remain largely unknown. I do know a bit about these matters. Then there's the incident at the 20th Party Congress of the Chinese Communist Party when Hu Jintao was forcibly removed from the stage. That, too, had underlying causes. Some little pink media outlets in Sydney crossed a line which led to suspicions within the CCP. One member of the CCP Youth League faction, fearing the revelations might implicate him, defected, leading to the collapse of the faction. The whole story is incredibly complex and dramatic. Sometimes I feel like my experiences are almost legendary. There's a lot circulating online about Xi Jinping, particularly regarding predictions made about his fate by Feng Shui. In reality, much of what's been said comes from my Yijing analysis, commissioned by his ex-wife's family in early 1992. What you see online is mostly distorted. Only 2 of the 4.5 sentences I originally shared have made it to the public. No one knows the remaining 2.5. The situation escalated so much that in 2008, Jiang Zemin, then president of China, secretly wrote me an acrostic poem. At a critical moment, he even hinted at being a relative of mine, much to my surprise. I didn't respond to his signals. Ultimately, though, he missed the point. His missteps contributed to the Wang Lijun incident and the murder of Neil Haywood by Jiang Zemin. Some dissident media outlets have claimed that Haywood knew about organ harvesting operations involving Jiang Zemin and Bo Xilai, but that's not the real story. I'll reveal the truth eventually, but the matter is too sensitive to fully disclose now. While we plan to share some exclusive news, we cannot gamble with humanity's future for the sake of sensationalism. The stakes are too high when it comes to matters of war and peace. It's essential that we approach these revelations carefully, with clarity and responsibility, to avoid any misjudgments.
All right, Mr. Changfeng, could you please take a moment to explain why you mentioned that your old acquaintance's son had messed up their family's hot pot seasoning business? And why has it caused such a big stir? Also, with such explosive news coming to light, why are you so sure that it's not just a coincidence?
Your question is quite humorous. You see, if they really used this substance in hot pot as seasoning, the whole pot would smell like urine. Why? Because the substance they are talking about online is a rocket propellant ingredient, ammonium perchlorate, diluted with water. The online rumor is that this rocket propellant could be used as hot pot fuel. I was personally involved in this story and I witnessed what had happened in the 1990s. The father of the Sydney Little Pink, at a specific place and time, met someone and made some mistakes. At the moment, the Little Pink's father was a director of a window company in our anti-WMD proliferation task. Many years later, both of us also became the targets of Bo Xilai, Xu Ming and Ma Jiangang to advantage in China internal politic fighting. This is how the story came about. At that time, a foreign military end user needed 20 tons of ammonium perchlorate urgently. Because China government already tightened export controls on the dual-use materials, it was impossible to apply for an export license. And the end user asked both of us whether there was any alternative to solve the problem. Then the Little Pink's father offered an idea: immerse semi-finished ammonium perchlorate in water and declare the item as hot pot fuel or automobile airbag detonator to avoid customs inspections in various countries along the way of the freight. After the materials were smuggled into the destination country, it can be dried, sieved and processed into AP propellant. Although the original plan didn't go through because the end user completed its own AP factory, the plan B was abandoned. Fast forward to years later, I stumbled upon a former technician at Little Pink's father's factory. This technician told me that Little Pink's father had bribed leaders at a state-owned rocket propellant factory in Henan, China. He also used the same trick mentioned above to avoid applying for dangerous goods transportation certificate in China for road transportation, because their family-owned factory was not allowed to provide the rocket propellant to PLA directly as other state-owned factories. After drying, sieving and packing again at the Henan factory with the state-owned factory's trademark and package, they sold them to the Chinese military. One of the end users was number 54 base. The base commander at that time was Wei Fenghe, the fallen China former defense minister and rocket army commander. The rocket propellant has a strange urine-like smell because it was made using a technique involving in the process of ammonium chloride electrolysis, which greatly reducing costs. In the end of 1990s, the PLA purchase price for AP was 15,000 renminbi at least. The Little Pink's father reduced the cost to 7,000 to 8,000 renminbi by his know-how. The price on international black market was around $15,000 at that time. From 2008 to 2015, people related to this family harassed me in Australia. Initially, I wasn't even living in Australia until 2006. Around 2008, after I migrated to Australia, I noticed that one of the shareholders of the little media was following me, and even 95% looked like one of my high school classmates who had recruited me finally as a MSS informant for the so-called anti-WMD proliferation project. In 2009, I encountered two former workers from Little Pink's father's factory. They said things to make me realize it was them, but I ignored them. Then in 2012, while studying IT at a local community college, I ran into another shareholder from their factory who tried to strike up a conversation with me again. I didn't respond him too. I have attempted to contact the police and seek legal services. However, as you know, Australia is a democratic and free country, and it's challenging to take action against someone simply because they resemble someone else, glare at you, or follow you around. After the fall of Ma Jian, Bo Xilai, and Xu Ming, I thought their games were over, but in 2019, they remotely monitored and hacked my home computers in an attempt to steal one of my fintech innovations. When I reported the case to the local police and reached out to a mainstream media outlet to disclose the details, they panicked. Later, I discovered that one of the shareholders of the Sydney media was actually the son of Dog Hair Eater, a nickname we use for the father of the Little Pink in our circle. I knew this because I was present when his father received a call from his mother, Fen, discussing how to change his name for a new ID. The new name symbolized that he was the little star in the sky of his parents, reflecting their wishes. I hope he doesn't end up being the unlucky star of their family. This whole ordeal, political struggles and harassment, has compelled me to speak out today. Some people's descendants resent me because they believe I am to blame for their parents' arrests or divorces after Xi Jinping's crackdown on the gang members linked to Bo Xilai and Ma Jian. In reality, I didn't volunteer for any of it. My stance is clear: I don't take sides in China's internal political struggles, no matter which faction they belong to, whether it's the Shanghai Gang or the Youth League faction. Let this serve as a warning to those tempted to follow in their footsteps: don't get involved in China's political meat grinder if you live in a free and democratic country. Your parents wouldn't want you to end up in prison because of futile schemes.
Right, Mr. Changfeng, thank you very much for you joining our interview. We hope you can bring us more exciting content in future shows. Goodbye. Okay, dear viewers, our channel will continue to arrange interviews with Mr. Changfeng, allowing him to share his legendary experiences over the past 30 years. You can also leave comments below our channel, challenge Mr. Changfeng's views, and ask sharp questions. You can also make requests for our show, listing the specific people and details you most want to know about. We will prioritize these in future interviews. Here, we also declare that some content of this show comes from the interviewed guests and does not represent the views of our channel. Thank you again for choosing our channel. Don't forget to click the little bell below the screen to subscribe to our show. Your support is our motivation to keep making shows. See you in the next episode.